Good morning. My name is Dr. Mansoor Agha, and I will facilitate this session on Introduction to Aptitude Tests. This session is the first in a series of sessions to make the participants aware of the intricacies of aptitude testing, which is used in tests such as GMAT, SAT, GRE, IMCAT, CSAT, LSAT, and campus placement tests, which are used for recruitment in engineering colleges and business schools. The agenda for this session is fourfold. We will first of all clarify who can benefit from these sessions so that if you belong to the relevant audience, then you should continue watching this and later sessions. We will get introduced to aptitude tests and we will try to understand whether aptitude tests are different from school or college exams that all of us are very comfortable with. We'll even attempt a question to understand how the same question is taught by a school teacher and by a good aptitude test teacher. Also, how the same question can be part of a school exam as well as an aptitude test, but it is used to test different competencies at these two places. Finally, we need to understand how we can improve our scores on an aptitude test. So, who can benefit from these sessions? The so-called targeted audience that these sessions were created for. Students preparing for aptitude tests such as GMAT, the Graduate Management Admission Test, which is required for admission to a global MBA or a Masters in Management. SAT, the Scholastic Aptitude Test as it was called previously. Now the acronym SAT does not have a full form, just called SAT, which is required for college admissions in US, Canada and the Gulf countries for all their undergraduate programs. GRE, the Graduate Record Examination, which is required for admission in a master's or a postgraduate program in American universities. IMCAT and other Indian Business School exams. CSAT, the Civil Services Aptitude Test, which is part of the preliminary examination for IAS, state level PCS and SSC exams in India. Moreover, if you are a teacher who helps students preparing for these aptitude tests, then you are the prime audience. Because if you benefit from these sessions, then you will be touching lives of thousands of students and making a more positive impact on their careers and lives. So, what is an aptitude test? An aptitude test is a modified IQ test or an intelligence test. An aptitude test checks whether a person has the desired potential and aptitude for doing a certain job or handling an academic program. So whether for admission into an MBA program or for getting the job of an IAS officer, you have to give an aptitude test. These aptitude tests are loaded with 70% questions from a true blue IQ test and about 30% questions that check whether you have the desired attitude, personality and the traits needed to excel in an academic environment or a particular job. Let's first get an idea about how intelligence and IQ develops in an individual. Nature and nurture play a role here. Basically, heredity has a big role to play here, and we'll not go into the debate about how big a role, but your parents' intelligence decides how intelligent you would be at the time of your birth. If you have intelligent parents, then you would be endowed with higher intelligence. On the lighter side, if you're understanding this academically loaded session, then thank your parents for it. After your birth, if your brain has to work more, then it gets more efficient and well-oiled and your intelligence increases. For your brain to work more, you need to be exposed to the right things. These are called as a stimulating environment. It has also been found that people with a greater IQ tend to seek stimulating environments and that further sharpens up your IQ. So your attitude can end up deciding your intelligence as well. This sharpening of the brain continues till the end of adolescence. As time passes, mental acuity, like height, stops increasing rapidly. Some scientists strongly believe that IQ stops increasing after the age of 16. So it is customary to use 16 as a divisor for mental age calculation among adults. Actually, certain mental functions increase slowly and slightly after the age of 16 also, and they peak in their 20s. If we look at the history of IQ testing to understand it better, then an English statistician, Francis Galton, made the first attempt at creating a standardized test for rating a person's intelligence and starting a new field of science called as psychometry. He used statistical methods, he believed in the role of hereditary intelligence, and that there should exist a correlation between intelligence and other desirable traits such as good reflexes, muscle grip, and size of the head. His IQ test checked parameters such as a person's height, body shape, and physical strength to get an idea about intelligence. Francis Galton also set up the first mental testing center in the world in 1882, and he published a book, Inquiries into Human Faculty and its Development, in 1883. Then came a French psychologist, Alfred Binet, who together with Victor Henry and T. Simon prepared the Binet-Simon test, which focused on verbal abilities or language abilities, believing that if somebody has better language capabilities, that person would automatically have a great intelligence. This Binet-Simon test was used to identify mental retardation in school children. So these people actually were convinced that the verbal or language abilities reflect intelligence of a person. Binet also gave the concept of mental age. This concept of mental age will be discussed later. Binet also thought that intelligence was multifaceted, but came under the control of practical judgment. Later, American psychologist Louis Terman at Stanford University revised the Binet-Simon scale and created the Stanford-Binet intelligence scales in 1916. It became the most popular test in the United States for several decades. Now the process of IQ testing was coming on the right track slowly. In 1904, the British psychologist Charles Spearman observed that children had roughly the same performance across all subjects. So, academically weak students were weak in roughly all the subjects, while students, let's call them good students, were good at all the subjects. Spearman argued that these observations reflected the influence of an underlying general mental ability that affected performance on all kinds of mental tests. He suggested that all mental performance could be conceptualized in terms of a single general ability factor, and a large number of narrow task-specific ability factors. Spearman named this general ability factor as G, the alphabet G, and labeled the specific factors or abilities for specific tasks as S, the alphabet S. Now, most of these G-loaded tests typically involve some form of abstract reasoning. Therefore, Spearman and others have regarded G or abstract reasoning as the essence of intelligence. In the 40s, Raymond Cattell identified two types of cognitive abilities in a revision of Spearman's concept of general intelligence. Fluid intelligence, or GF as it was denoted, was described as the ability to solve novel problems by using reasoning or common sense. And crystallized intelligence, denoted by GC, was described as a knowledge-based ability that was very dependent on education and experience. In addition, fluid intelligence was hypothesized to decline with age, while crystallized intelligence was largely resistant to age. With time, a hierarchy of factors is used. General intelligence, or G, being at the top. Under it are 10 broad abilities that in turn are subdivided into 70 narrow abilities. The broad abilities are, first of all, fluid intelligence, or GF. It includes the ability to reason, form concepts, solve problems using unfamiliar information or novel procedures. Second, crystallized intelligence, GC. It includes the breadth and depth of a person's acquired knowledge, the ability to communicate one's knowledge, and the ability to reason using previously learned experiences or procedures. Quantitative reasoning, GQ, is the ability to comprehend quantitative concepts and relationships and to maintain and manipulate numerical symbols. So, psychologists believed that anyone who has the ability to handle maths or numbers automatically develops a better intelligence. Fourth, reading and writing ability, GRW. It includes basic reading and writing skills. Short-term memory, which is the fifth one, is the ability to apprehend and hold information in immediate awareness and then use it within a few seconds. Sixth, long-term storage and retrieval, GLR, is the ability to store information and fluently retrieve it later in the process of thinking. Seventh, visual processing, GV, is the ability to perceive, analyze, synthesize, and think with visual patterns, including the ability to store and recall visual representations. Eighth, auditory processing, GA, is the ability to analyze, synthesize, and discriminate auditory stimuli, including the ability to process and discriminate speech sounds that may be presented under distorted conditions. Processing speed, GS, which is the ninth one, is the ability to perform automatic cognitive tasks, particularly when measured under pressure to maintain focused attention. 10th, decision time, reaction time, decision speed or decision time. GT, it reflects the immediacy with which an individual can react to a stimuli or a task, typically measured in seconds or fractions of seconds. It is not to be confused with GS, which is typically measured in intervals of 2 to 3 minutes. Now, let's attempt a question to understand the difference between crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. This given question needs a crystallized intelligence background. That is, a student should have an idea of the concept of arithmetic progression. But this can also be solved if a student knows just a little bit of arithmetic and can visualize the problem here. This visualization is an example of fluid intelligence. And I repeat, this fluid intelligence is required to get a good score on an IQ test or an aptitude test. I want to give you another 30 seconds to have a look at this question to understand it better and maybe even solve it. And then I'll discuss it in detail. Read it carefully. The method taught in schools and colleges to handle this question needs that you know the necessary mathematical formulas required in arithmetic progression. You replace the right known values in the formula and be impeccable at calculating out the answer in several steps. Actually, if this question appears in a school or a college exam, then half of the marks are given for following the right sequence of steps, and rest of the half marks are given for arriving at the right answer, to 2 positions of decimals at least. Now let's solve this question according to the method taught in schools. This schoolish method is based on crystallized intelligence. We first of all need to know the basic formula which is required here. Once you've written down the formula, then you substitute the values. If I substitute values, then here n's value is 10. We were talking about 10 days. A1 is basically the value for the first day in the sequence, and D is the difference between the days, between consecutive days. Now I do the rest of the calculation, and it takes 3 steps for me to arrive at a certain answer, which is 4250. I can see that 4250 is mentioned as option B, so I end up marking B as the answer for this particular question. Now suppose somebody doesn't know the school method of solving this question, which requires a specific formula and a several step calculation, then this question can also be done by pure fluid intelligence as well. This fluid intelligence method requires that you understand the question so properly that you can visualize the situation and can understand what's needed, without an inkling or knowledge about the needed formula. Say, penalty for the 10 days will be 200 for the first day, 200 plus 50 for the second day, 200 plus 100 for the third day onwards, and for the 10th day the penalty should be 200 plus 450. Which means, put simply, total penalty will be equal to 200 multiplied by 10 plus 45 times x. Look at it to understand it better. This whole thing should happen inside your head. Now, 45 times 50 is 2250. You add it to 2000 and you end up getting your answer, which is 4250. Now you can see that 4250 is present in option B. As a result, you end up marking that as your answer. Now compare both ways of handling this question. If you attempt according to the classical way taught in schools and colleges, then you need to master the necessary mathematical formulae and do a multiple step calculation, and every step of calculation increases your chances of making a mistake. On the other hand, if you visualize this question and do it in a more effective manner, then you don't need to remember complex mathematical formulas and calculations. Now, this will decrease your chances of making a mistake as you are more clear about what the question is asking for, and there are less calculation steps which are involved here. So, how is IQ measured nowadays? Alfred Binet had given the concept of mental age as distinguished from a chronological age. So let's understand what is mental age. Suppose a 5-year-old child performed mentally as well as an average 9-year-old child. Then this 5-year-old child will be assigned a mental age of 9. And a 5-year-old child, another 5-year-old child, who performed only as well as a 4-year-old normal child, then this 5-year-old child would be assigned a mental age of 4. As a result, IQ is basically a fraction of mental age and physical age multiplied by 100, where the numerator is mental age and the physical age is the denominator. Normally, while calculating, the physical age is taken as 16, which is the maximum age at which certain psychologists believe your IQ can increase. This normal IQ would be 100, technically. Nowadays, every IQ test measures 5 broad areas with different weightage given to the 5 areas according to the requirement. The 5 parameters for measuring IQ are, first of all, language or verbal skills. The second parameter is numbers or quantitative aptitude or numerical ability or basic numeracy, as you can call it. The third parameter is reasoning, which is the ability to solve novel problems based upon your knowledge and past experience. Then there is active memory. Active memory is the ability to store important information in your memory and quickly recall that information whenever it is needed to solve a particular problem. Fifth, hallmarks of intelligence. Now, this is the tricky, ununderstandable bit for people who are not flexible in changing themselves. These are the strange ways in which very intelligent people with very high intelligence think. People who've got IQ somewhere around 200. I'm not talking about normal people like you and me who would have an IQ of 80 to 100 and we still survive and succeed in this world. The first parameter to test your intelligence is verbal ability, and it is also the most important parameter in IQ tests. You can kind of call it language ability, verbal ability, or linguistic ability, and it really doesn't matter whether you're tested for your skills in English, French, Mandarin, or Hindi. So comfort and expertise on a particular language doesn't really count. Any language would do for this test. Psychometricians believe that learning a language is such a difficult task that in the process of learning a language, your brain has to work hard, and as a result it becomes sharper with a higher intelligence, obviously. So one way of checking a person's intelligence is to check how good that person is in solving language-based questions. Broadly, 2 types of questions come. Questions that test knowledge of concepts, for example, grammar-based questions, and the second type are questions that check application of concepts. Example, questions that have tricky language. You can be tested for grammar, reading comprehension, parajumbles, vocabulary, fill in the blanks in sentences, essay writing skills, etc. The second most important area in IQ tests is mathematics. You can call it mathematics, but what actually appears in IQ tests is something very different from math, called as numerical ability or quantitative aptitude or basic numeracy. Psychometricians believe that learning mathematics is also very difficult work, and your brain has to work hard to learn concepts and work hard to solve math problems based on these concepts. Then as a result, brain becomes more well-oiled and sharper. Now, hardcore mathematics is not tested in IQ tests, but quantitative aptitude questions in IQ tests check easy concepts with lesser or less complicated calculations. But language of questions is tricky and they check tricky concepts. Put simply, quantitative aptitude, the way it appears in an IQ test, checks the sharpness of your brain by giving questions of common sense in the language of mathematics. So you need to know math to excel, but knowledge of school or college level maths is just not enough. You can be tested by questions based on basic arithmetic, algebra, geometry, and modern maths, etc. But you don't have to prove theorems, and the questions neither have difficult mathematical concepts nor do they require longer or more complex calculations. Reasoning is the third way to test your intelligence. It can be called plainly as reasoning or logical reasoning or critical reasoning or analytical ability or analytical reasoning, etc. As a human being, we are not taught reasoning as a subject in school or in college, but we learn reasoning automatically by our experiences and by observing others. For example, we observe that being careless while crossing a road can cause accidents. So we reason out that we need to be more careful while crossing a road. Now, reasoning is a definitive characteristic of human nature. It is the capacity for consciously making sense of things, applying logic, establishing and verifying facts, and making calculations and conclusions based on new or existing information. It is the means by which people understand themselves. They understand how to think about cause and effect, truth and falsehood, and what is good or bad for you, etc. You can be tested by questions based on logical reasoning, critical reasoning, analytical ability, general mental ability, integrated reasoning, etc. In case of reasoning questions, you may be familiar with most of the tested concepts, but you need an exposure of different designs in which reasoning questions can be packaged. Then you have to check in which type of question are you making a mistake, learn the right method of handling that question, and not repeating the mistake again. Active memory is the fourth way to test your IQ. Active memory is the ability to understand and memorize things, and keeping all that information readily available when we need it. This is called as active memory. So, ability to understand and have knowledge and a sharp brain to use that knowledge is not enough if you cannot remember things fast enough when you need them. You can be tested by questions based on concepts which have to be memorized, say a particular formula or a strategy that ensures perfectly right answers, and how that formula can be used to arrive at the right answer. Hallmarks of Intelligence is the fifth way to test your IQ. People with high IQ think and behave differently as compared to us, mere mortals. Most of us have an IQ of 80 to 100, but aptitude tests are designed after studying very intelligent people who have IQ scores above a 200, how they behave while solving a problem. And this gets tested in IQ tests. Very intelligent people normally look for clarity and symmetry in language, and they avoid redundancy in verbal ability questions. Also, very intelligent people focus on accuracy and calculate carefully in quantitative aptitude questions. Also, very intelligent people use certain strategies to solve questions. A strategy is a method of solving a question so that silly mistakes can be avoided and the question can be attempted in less time with a greater amount of accuracy. In later sessions of this series, we will learn easy ways to specifically excel in verbal ability, quantitative aptitude, reasoning, active memory, and hallmarks of intelligence. Later sessions will not load you up with history, but the historical background had to be given in the session to develop the required perspective. We would love to have your inputs, what you liked or disliked, and any suggestions from you that can help us improve this session and the future sessions. Thank you for watching this. If you liked this initial session, you're welcome to see more by joining our FB group, our Facebook group, or by subscribing to our YouTube channel.